صلوات محمد وآل محمد. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would just like to ask the brothers to have a seat in the hall, and inshallah we'll get started with our majlis program today. As we all are coming together to commemorate once again another night of majalis for the commemoration of the shahada of our fourth holy Imam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And just like yesterday, we are very blessed and honored to have Shaykh Salim Yusufali here with us for another evening of majlis recitation tonight. So we're once again looking forward to benefiting from his knowledge and from his experience. And we thank him again for being with us this past weekend. And we really got a chance to get to know him more. And inshallah, we'll be continuing to see him in the future, inshallah. Salawat Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now we'll begin the program with the recitation of the Holy Quran, and I'd like to please request Brother Muhammad Sajjad to begin the recitation, and then following that we'll have the recitation of the Salam program as well. Salawat Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من كان يريد العاجلة عجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد ثم جعلنا له جهنم يصلاها مذموما مدحورا ومن أراد الآخرة وسعى لها سعيها وهو مؤمن فأولئك كان سعيهم مشكورا كلا نمد هؤلاء وهؤلاء من عطاء ربك وما كان عطاء ربك محظورا انظر كيف فضلنا بعضهم على بعض وللآخرة أكبر درجات وللآخرة أكبر درجات وأكبر تفضيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. بار محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. کیسا ہے یہ چراغا کیسا ہے یہ چراغا دل ڈوبے جا رہے ہیں. کیا شام آ گیا ہے. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. ہونے لگی اذانیں کیسے سروں کو دھانپے بازو بندے ہوئے ہیں خون رو رہی ہے آنکھیں آنکھوں کے خون سے راستے خون میں نہا رہے ہیں. کیا شام آ گیا ہے. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. نیزوں پہ جتنے سر ہیں ایک سر ہے ان میں ایسا آنکھیں ہیں بند اس کی اور خاک پر ہے گرتا. عباس کا یہ سر ہے تیور بتا رہے ہیں. کیا شام آ گیا ہے. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. ماں کی گودیوں سے لپٹے ہوئے ہیں بچے ہیں ہاتھ رسیوں میں ماں کے ایسے جکڑے بچے جو گر رہے ہیں وہ مرتے جا رہے ہیں. کیا شام آ گیا ہے. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. اتنا چلے ہیں پیدل کانٹوں پہ سر قیصر قیدی تھک جاتی چلتے چلتے چلتی اگر زمین بھی پیروں کے آبلے بھی آنسو بہا رہے ہیں. کیا شام آ گیا ہے. اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں. ریحان قیدیوں میں برپا ہے شور و گریا سمجھو بنت زہرا سجاد نوح خواہ ہے نوح سنا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں کیسا ہے یہ چراغا کیسا ہے یہ چراغا دل ڈوبے جا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اور محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
Jazakallah, thank you so much, Brother Muhammad Sajjad, for your recitations. I'd now like to please request Brother Ali Abbas Hasnain to come forward for a recitation of Salam. Salawat Muhammad Imam Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد کربلا زندہ ہے جینے کی لگن زندہ ہے کربلا زندہ ہے جینے کی لگن زندہ ہے حق پہ چلنے کے لیے حق کا چلن زندہ ہے کربلا زندہ ہے جینے کی لگن زندہ ہے ظلمت کفر میں دم توڑ چکی فکر یزید ظلمت کفر میں دم توڑ چکی فکر یزید جا بجا ذکر شہن شاہ زمن زندہ ہے کربلا زندہ ہے جینے کی لگن زندہ ہے مرحبا زینب مزتر ہے یہ تیری محنت مرحبا زینب مزتر ہے یہ تیری محنت جو آزادار کا دنیا میں چمن زندہ ہے کربلا زندہ ہے جینے کی لگن زندہ ہے اہل غم کاندھوں پہ تابوت لیے نکلے ہیں اہل غم کاندھوں پہ تابوت لیے نکلے ہیں دل میں سجاد کے پیروں کی تھکن زندہ ہے करबला जिंदा है जीने की लगन जिंदा है करबला जिंदा है जीने की लगन जिंदा है सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मोहम्मद व आले
Jazakallah, thank you so much, Brother Ali Abbas, for your recitation. Just one quick announcement before we begin the lecture for this evening. There were some community members who noticed that there was a lot of trash and half-eaten food left on the property after the majlis was concluded yesterday. So we just want to make a reminder that we will ask everybody to please take care of the halls as well inside, but especially to take care of the property on the outside as well, so that we can all do our part, and particularly remind the kids and the children that if there's any food that is not eaten from the tabarruk, that they take it home with them, so we can ask the parents to help the kids remember these things, and then also to make sure that all the trash has been thrown away prior to leaving the property after the program is concluded. Salawat Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now I'd like to please request Shaykh Salim Yusufali to come forward, and we'll begin the lecture for this evening. Salawat Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Oh. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من ليلتنا هذه إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم. May Allah reward you for your good intentions in participating in this gathering of mourning and commemoration for the martyrdom of Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zain al-Abidin. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, it's been an honor for me to be present in these gatherings for commemoration and mourning for Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. And I wanted to just say that the seed for my visit here was actually planted in a ziyarah trip that I had some months back to different cities, including the holy city of Qum, where I had a chance to meet with respected scholar Sayyid Hassan Naqvi. And as part of our conversation there, he talked to me about this, group of mu'mineen and some of the efforts and endeavors that are taking place here. And when he was describing, the setup and different kind of activities, I was intrigued. I said that this is something that's really interesting to me. So then when the brothers approached me and said, okay, well, can you visit? I was keen on doing it, alhamdulillah. And I appreciate the opportunity. It was truly an experience, and it was very nice to get to know all of you. It was a short visit, but in the short time, I feel that for a number of you, I got to know you, to some extent, more than normally would be the case if with such a short visit. I wanted to commend the efforts of everyone involved with these programs, with these efforts, those who participate, those who volunteer, those who sponsor, the people that we see kind of running around doing AV, changing batteries, cleaning up, those we don't see who behind the scenes are doing different things. May Allah reward you all, and inshallah your reward will be with Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the Day of Judgment. As a reward for your marhumin and marhumat, and the marhumin and marhumat of everyone who's present in this gathering, let's give them with a recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Brothers and sisters, last night we talked about the tears of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, the mourning and grief of Imam Sajjad. And we said that if we look at his grief and tears at a shallow level, then we would say that my question, why is it that the Imam alayhi salam for decades upon decades was just crying, he was just mourning? What was the point behind that? Was he just sad, and was it just an extended and prolonged sadness? Is that something which is commendable from the perspective of Islam in the Quran? But when we looked at it in a deeper way, we were able to see that this grief of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was something which was transformational. And we gave that example of the clouds, and the clouds representing gham or ghamam, and how when certain type of grief is such that it just stays in that cloudy state. But there's other grief which is dealt with through the rih and that gentle breeze, which may turn into like rain, which then leads to even more sunshine. And that was something that we discussed about how that process of grief is transformational. So when we did that, we saw Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, inshallah, in a different light. We saw how we should look at him more than just being somebody who was sick for a few days in Karbala. By the way, that quote that I gave you, or what I mentioned about him, we shouldn't refer to him as Bimar of Karbala, that wasn't from me. That was from one of our respected Maraja. And he's the one who says that we need to rethink the way that we approach Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Now tonight I want to talk about another aspect of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, which is that he was one who was frequently seen making dua. Like Imam Sajjad is known as one who was a da'. Da' means that you call upon Allah in dua. So frequently we know that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was reciting du'as. And those du'as many of them are preserved as a legacy for us. Part of the spiritual life of believers is to make use of the treasures of the du'as of our Prophet and of the Imams. But of all the du'as that we make use of, many of them are from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Like in the month of Ramadan, all of you, inshallah, are in the habit of at least once in a while, if not every morning, of reading at least some lines from Dua Abi Hamza al-Thumali, which is from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Most of you are probably in the habit of, on a daily basis, reading at least a portion of the daily dua for that day. That is from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Many of you are in the habit, or if not, then this is something which is good to do, to read the munajat of Imam Sajjad for that day. Every day, according to Allama Majlisi, in Bihar al-Anwar, he has divided the 15 munajat of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam according to each day. And because there's 15 divided by 7 there's a remainder, right? So he says that, okay, that third one because Thursday night is supposed to be a special night of ibadah, so he has somehow arranged it, Thursday night you do an extra one. But anyhow, this is something which is also a very important practice in the devotional life of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. I usually give advice to people. I say that if you're looking for an instant tear jerker, right? Something that will really tug at the strings of your heart and lead you to connect with Allah Ta'ala in a very powerful way, try these munajat of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. You don't have to do, like Allama Majlisi mentions, 2 of them for each day. You don't have to do both of them, right? Even if you do one of them, even if you do half of one of them, but read it sincerely and see what it does for you, how it redefines your connection with Allah Ta'ala. It can be something which is very powerful. Anyhow, these are some samples of the dua of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Now, when we think about Imam Sajjad doing dua, just like we talked about him being a bukka, sometimes we can look at it in a very shallow way and not understand the depth of why he was doing dua. We have this in history. There was one example, it's a famous story, I'm sure you've heard of it before, where Tawus al-Yamani, Tawus was one of the companions of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. He was in Makkah, at Masjid al-Haram in the month of Ramadan. So Tawus al-Yamani says that I went into the Kaaba, I was doing my ibadah, and I saw there was a man who was covered in a cloak, right, in his abba, and he had pulled it over his head. And he was wailing, and he was crying, and he was doing munajat, and he was making dua. So I went near him, and I was kind of moved by the extent of what he was saying. But I felt sorry for him. And so I went to him and I said that, oh, so-and-so, it's the month of Ramadan. Maybe your sins are to the extent of all the mountains in the world. But given that it's the month of Ramadan, you should know that the bounty of Allah is greater than your sins. So don't despair. Right? Allah will forgive you for your sins. And then Tawus al-Yamani says that I saw that the man pulled his abba from his head, and I saw it was none other than Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein. So when I saw that, then he said, I was taken aback. And I said that, oh, son of Rasulullah, right, if this is the way that you are, what about us? Right? If this is the way that you're begging and entreating Allah, what about us? Now, Tawus al-Yamani, may Allah increase his rank and elevate his status. At least in this case, you can see that sometimes, he might have had this perception of the Imam as making dua as somebody who is just, overly, let's say, maybe in his mind, overly concerned about his sins. And so that's why he's making dua. Now we know that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is ma'asum, right? He's free from sin. But we have to ask ourselves this question, that why is it that the Imam was making so much dua? Right? What was the point behind that? And there are different ways of understanding this. Some people say that, well, the Imam alayhi salam, he didn't have a platform. So he needed to be able to deliver very powerful messages. He needed it to develop to convey the heritage and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. He needed to attract people to the cause of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So the way he went about doing that is through his du'as and his munajat. And definitely that was one of the reasons why he would make so much dua. He didn't have another platform. But perhaps we can say that there is another reason for why the Imam alayhi salam was making these du'as. When people who are they find themselves in a situation where they have something unique happen to them. Like, for example, they do really well in business, or they do really well, like, let's say, in academia, or something happens, right? So then they start to become famous. A lot of times they say that, let me write a book, right? Let me write this book and give people, those keys to success that I came across. So they say, like, for example, 7 steps to, like, I don't know, making it rich, or this is how you, become a millionaire by working 4 hours a day, or 2 hours a day, or 1 hour a day, and, so on and so forth. It's always like the latest trend in the fashion. They do that, a lot of times it's like retrospectively. They're like, oh, maybe it was this or this that, like, led to my success. And we know that from a divinely, inspired framework, that what they talk about is often limited. I'm not saying that it's useless, right? Many times we can get some good points from it, but it's limited because we know that, behind all of that, right, they were doing different things, but there was somebody who was planning out all these things. And oftentimes they just miss that completely. When Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is making those du'as, right, what is taking place here in history? According to Ayatollah Khamenei, hafidhahullah, right, the same scholar who says that don't refer to him as Bimar Karbala, he says something very important there. He says that this period of the imamat of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is the most difficult period of the imamah in the entire history. So the Imam alayhi salam is going through incredible difficulty. Other scholars have said that of all the imams, right, including Imam Ali alayhi salam, including Imam Hussein alayhi salam, including Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the imam who was most political and most active politically was Imam Ali ibn Hussein, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Now, maybe we started out with this understanding of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam as being bimar, or now we said, okay, he was always doing sajda, he's always doing ibadah, he's always doing this, always making dua. And now our great scholars who analyze history, they're saying that this is the most politically active imam in all of history. So what then do these du'as represent? Perhaps we can say that these du'as represented how the Imam alayhi salam was able to accomplish what he accomplished despite having this burden of so much difficulty and tragedy and trial upon him. There's this concept of reframing, right? You might have heard about it before. Like when something happens to you, you try to see it from a different perspective, right? And a lot of times they talk about the importance of this. Like, let's say you're trying to heal from like trauma or something happens to you. Like you go to somebody, you want help, they'll tell you that, okay, you just got to think about it in a different way. And they say that, oh, this is the way you think about it, maybe this way or that way. Be positive, right? Don't think about the negatives. Like, just think about the positive things, right? Here we see Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, as he's going through this trial after trial, oppression, family members, this thing, that thing, Shias being few in number, all these things, we see that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is making those du'as. I'll give you an example. Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, Allahumma ja'alni asulu bika inda darura. Okay, this phrase right here is extremely interesting and beautiful and useful. Okay, asulu comes from the word sala in the Arabic language. Sala is actually used to describe the actions of a lion when the lion is provoked. When a lion is provoked, it's different than another animal, right? Let's say, you have, an elephant or something like that, right? They have their own movements and the lion has its own movement. And the Arabic language is very descriptive when it comes to the movement of animals. So here, the Arabic sala means that when a lion is provoked, right, the lion moves rapidly and the lion moves with energy and determination. The lion knows exactly what it's going to do. The lion is filled with energy. What is the Imam alayhi salam praying for in this dua? He's saying that, oh Allah, when darura comes to me, when I have a situation where it's a compelling circumstance, when I'm faced with a difficulty, I'm put in a tight spot. Oh Allah, I want to have a response like the response of a lion. And as opposed to something else, my response, I want it to be one which is filled with action and determination. Where is that coming from? Allahumma ja'alni asulu bika inda darura. By means of my connection with you. Bika, meaning with you, by you. By you and my connection with you, I want to be like that lion. Now, I hope you are with me here, inshallah, brothers and sisters, that this is extremely powerful. We're talking about the concept of reframing. Because a lot of people when they're faced with a difficult situation, they have one of two responses. Response number one is that they despair, right? They're like, oh my God, like how am I going to deal with this, right? And they just kind of like break down, and they just freeze, or they fawn or whatever. They just go into a state where they don't know how to respond to it, right? And they're just kind of stuck. That's one response. Another response is that when people sometimes are faced with different difficulties, they do respond. They do go into action. They do try to figure out, well, what to do next. But the source of their dependence in that situation is themselves and none other than themselves. And here the Imam ﷺ is teaching us something else. He's saying that, oh Allah, I want to respond in that way, but by means of you. There's a story I want to share here, which is a story which is I find this very illustrative, and it can really hit you, right? It's a story from the life of Yusufali Khayyat. I'm sure you've heard this name before. He was one of those very enlightened figures that many of our scholars have talked about, his purity, his sincerity, and some of the karamat, the miracles that Allah gave him. Right? So this story says that once there was, it's a simple story, but it's powerful. The Shaykh Yusufali Khayyat, he was traveling with somebody to one of the cities, Kermanshah. And when they got to that city, right, his companion narrates, he says that Shaykh Yusufali said that let's go and visit so-and-so. And this person was apparently like, I don't know, similarly like a scholarly figure, it seems. I'm not sure exactly. So they went to see him, and when they get there, Shaykh Yusufali is quiet. Right? He doesn't really say that much. So finally, that person they went to visit, he says to him, Shaykh, so tell me, what is it that you're here for? Right? I know that there's something, you've been quiet. Like, tell me, what is it that that you came all the way to visit me here for? So Shaykh says something very interesting. He says that, what should I say to somebody who has more dependence on what Allah has given him, like his own talents, his own abilities, than upon the fadl and the divine grace? What kind of question is this, right? Like, I mean, if you think about it, if we hear that question, it's like, it's hard to dissect it, right? It's like, whoa, that's deep, like, what should I say to the one who has more dependency on his own abilities, on his own, kind of mind, his own way of thinking about it, his own analysis, than the fadl and the divine grace, the blessings of Allah and the inspiration from Allah? Now this person they had gone to visit, he thought about it for a bit, and he became moved by that statement. And he started to feel it, right? He realized that this was a message for him. He takes his amama, he takes off his amama, and he starts to beat his head on the wall. Okay, not in a way which is kind of violent and damaging him, right? But in a way to kind of reprimand himself, right? And sometimes we need to do this for ourselves. We need to reprimand ourselves. Like, what have I done, right? How have I been mistaken this way? And then this companion of Shaykh Yusufali says that I wanted to go and stop him from doing this, and Shaykh said, no, let him do it, right? He needs to go through this, right? This is why I had come here to give him this message right here. Take this back to this line of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, right? He's saying that Allahumma ja'alni asudu bika inda darura. When things happen to me, I get into a tight spot. I don't want to be like that one who's just frozen, inactive, not knowing what to do, right? I want to be somebody who's active. And we see in the life of Imam Sajjad as-Salam, this is the way he was, right? When our scholars are saying that he was the most politically active Imam, it means that he was doing so much, right? Yet, if he wanted to, he could have made an excuse saying that I've done enough, right? I've seen enough, right? I'm just going to be sitting and crying and doing nothing at that point. He doesn't do that. He gets active. But at the same time, he understands what is the source of where he's getting all this from. Right? He's not relying on himself, right? His own mind, his own abilities. He realizes that at this time, it's all from Allah Ta'ala. Right? This is a very powerful message, because it's not just a dua, which is telling us that this is what you should ask from Allah. He himself lived through this. He himself is saying that this is what I'm using here when I'm facing these challenges in my life. This is how I'm approaching it. This is how I'm reframing. This is how I'm repurposing. This is how I'm adjusting when these things happen to me. So this is one example of a principle that we can take and apply in our lives from the du'as of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, these things, when we talk about them, this falls into the category of, the practical teachings of Tawheed. And sometimes when we talk about them, if we don't pay attention, if we don't ask ourselves like this question of how can I take this and apply in my life, then it can just be something abstract. So my request of brothers and sisters tonight is that let's be thinking about like these principles, how can we apply them in our lives? Every one of us, if we haven't already, we will face times in our life where things don't go the way that we want. And when that happens in the current society that we're living in, with our current lifestyles, with the current way that we've been trained to think about difficulties, oftentimes people just crumble, right? They don't know how to deal with these things. And sometimes it leads to severe like mental health issues, right? And there's a rise in these cases here, right? Some of it goes back to the loss of basic principles that we can govern our lives with, right? We're led to think that life is something other than it actually is. And when these things happen to us, we have no way of dealing with them. So these are things that we need to train ourselves on and also convey to the next generation. I'm going to give you another example of one of these principles from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. There was once a man who was making dua. And this is a man who was afflicted, right? He was going through a rough time. So he's making dua. What is he saying? He's saying, Allahumma rzuqni sabr. Oh Allah, grant me and give me the gift of patience. Help me to deal with whatever I'm dealing with. Give me more patience. Increase my patience. And I'm sure it's a dua that all of us have made at some time, right? Like especially those of you who are parents, right? Oh Allah, give me more patience, right? I really need it, right? So Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, he sees this man who's making dua. He's saying, oh Allah, give me more patience. And maybe if it was us, we'd be like kind of impressed, like, wow, man, this time this is good. This person asking for like more patience, right? So Imam Sajjad alayhi salam goes to him and he claps him on the back, right? Clapping on the back meaning that he's like, a little bit like upset with him, right? He's a little bit wants to convey a message to him. Maybe this was one of his companions and he expected more out of him. He wanted to guide him to a higher level of understanding. So he claps him on the back and he says that, La taqul hada, don't say this, right? What you're asking for here is more trials and afflictions, right? Like right now you're being afflicted and you're just saying that, oh Allah, like give me more, like just give me patience to deal with that. Like make your dua, make it the right way. Frame things in the right perspective. So what does he say? He says that rather, لكن سل الله العافية والشكر على العافية فإن الشكر على العافية خير من الصبر على البلاء. Okay, he says something, and I know this is very profound stuff here. It's very deep stuff. He says that don't ask God for more sabr, right? But rather ask Allah for afiyah. Afiyah, we're going to translate it right now as well-being, but I'm going to get back to that translation and I'm going to go into it a little bit. Ask God for well-being, but not just well-being. Ask Him for gratitude for well-being as well. Because having gratitude for well-being is better than having patience in the time of difficulty and trial. Now, what is it that's going on here, right? The Imam alayhi salam is defining a term for this person which is often absent from our conversations, and even it's not even in our scope. It's not part of our worldview. Right? Ask yourself, what does health mean to you? How have you been told about health? Right? What is it that, like, a typical definition of health? What is the typical definition of well-being? A lot of us would say that well, if you think about it, And I'm sure you think about it right now. You're like, okay, well, somebody who's healthy is somebody who is what? Not sick, right? Somebody who's not sick. So we define health by the absence of something, right? And there's a very interesting discussion, by the way, about how historically we have been trained to think about health in this way. It wasn't always this way, right? I think I have some doctors in the room here, right? Right? I mean, I'm like medical doctors. So I know we have like doctors, but we have medical doctors in the room, right? It wasn't always this way that this is how the approach to health was. I'm tempted to go into this, but I'm not going to go into it. I don't want to take too much time. But I'll just mention like a little bit, right? Historically, health was not treated as the absence of illness. Health was not the absence of germs, right? We're told that, okay, wear your mask, right? Put on all this like hand sanitizers. God forbid that you get germs and cooties or something like that, right? And we're told that that's what it means to get sick, and health is like absence of germs. There was a time when there was a different understanding of health, which was that health is not something which is the absence of something, but rather it is something that you're working to have and to maintain. And then what happened was that there was some very influential, wealthy people who were funding medical schools, and they decided that rather than taking that understanding of health, which is known as the terrain theory, they would take the understanding of germ theory of medicine. And that led to the development of modern medicine. Okay, and it's a very interesting discussion I don't want to get into right now. But let's go back to this. Is health the absence of something or health the presence of something? Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is teaching this man that you need to be asking Allah for something from Him, right? Something from Him which is called afiyah. Meaning it is the presence of something that you need to acknowledge the awareness of, which is afiyah. Afiyah is something. It's a blessing. It's a condition which comes from Allah. All of you, I'm sure, have heard this dua if you don't make it yourself in sujood, where we say that what? We say, Ya wali al-afiyah. Nas'aluka al-afiyah. Afiyat ad-dunya wal-akhirah. Wa tamam al-afiyah. Wa dawam al-afiyah. If we say the whole version of it, wa shukra al-afiyah. Right? What is it that we're asking for there? We're asking for not just the absence, oh Allah, don't give me any of those germs and those cooties. No. We're saying, oh Allah, give me something which is well-being and health in the true sense of that word. And not just that wealth, give me the ability to be aware of it and grateful for it, and give it to me in a way which it continues, and I'm acknowledging its continuous nature, right? I want to be aware of it. I want to be aware of how it continues as well too, right? And I want it to be a complete afiyah, right? This is so powerful in terms of reframing our understanding of things, right? I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I mean by why it's powerful. A lot of times when you think about health and wellness, well-being, just the other day I got a thing in the mail, right? It says it's time for your kids' well care check. I was like, you have to come in for the kids' well care, right? I was like, what is this well care stuff, right? Is that? It sounds like it sounded to me like they're a little bit desperate for some like money, because like we need to get some more generate some more income here, right? We gotta get your well care checks here, okay? And it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do, right? And they talk about like, okay, well, even if you don't have any physical problems, then at least we can talk about your mental, kind of problems. So bring your kids and we'll have a chat with them, right? It's like, thank you, but no thanks. I'll pass on that, especially that part about the chat. Cause I know what they're gonna talk to my kids about, right? So we have this understanding of health and wellness, right? The majority of our understanding has to do with health and well-being having to do with our body. And sometimes it goes a little bit further and we understand it to do something with our mind as well too. There's a general acceptance and at least awareness growing that there's some connection there, there's some understanding. We have to make sure that we're healthy when it comes to our mental state and our physical state. When we go to the teachings of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam and our Prophet and the other Imams alayhi salam, we see that there's a very deep understanding of wellness and well-being. That is an understanding of health from a multidimensional and holistic perspective. It encompasses not only our body is important. The Imam Sajjad in his dua for afiyah in Sayfat Sajjadiyah, which I would recommend all of us take a look at, inshallah, he does pray for sihhatul badan, for the health of the body. But he doesn't just stop there. He talks about having health when it comes to this world and health when it comes to the akhirah. Health, meaning health in our body and health in our soul. Health in our soul and health in our mind. What people are understanding now, even though we had this understanding in the past, in the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, it was present, is that you cannot focus just on the health of the body and ignore the health of everything else. You might have a health of your body, but you live a terrible life. Why? Because there's a problem in the other areas. Just recently, as I mentioned last night, I had a chance to visit, go for ziyarah. I mentioned tonight as well too. And as part of that visit, myself and one of my colleagues, we had a chance to visit one of the great scholars who works in the area of tarbiyah and what's called sabk zindagi Islami, meaning Islamic lifestyle. His name is Shaykh Abbas Waladi. So we're talking about different issues, right? And he told us a story. We were talking about, in particular, one of the things we were going a little bit deeper into is the Islamic approach to mental health. So he told us a story. He said one time I was giving a lecture, and in my lecture I talked about the importance of having good relationships with your parents, and how when you have a good relationship with your parents, it's something which affects everything else as well too. It has effects beyond just it being a sin to have bad relationships with your parents. You're going to see it not just in the hereafter, but it has effects in the dunya as well too. So this sheikh was there. I have it recorded, right? He's saying that after I gave that speech, there's this one man who came to me, and he said that, for 20 years, I have been going from therapist to therapist, and I've had these problems, and none of them have been able to solve the problems that I have. But he says that I heard that thing in your speech, and it struck me that, is there a connection, perhaps, between what's happening at my level of my soul and the type of mental health problems I'm having, right? Now, we're not saying that all mental health problems derive from spiritual issues, right? Many times mental health problems derive from our lifestyle choices, right? And sometimes it's actually something wrong, right? There's a medical issue that's there. But what we're saying is that he thought that maybe there's a connection. Could there be a connection between the mental health issue I'm facing and between the spiritual problems I have, this sin, which is, I don't have a good relationship with my parents. So he said, right then and there, I decided to make a couple of phone calls and to address some issue I had with my parents. And he says that for the first time in 20 years, right, I feel a type of peace and a type of mental health that I haven't felt. Why? Because I mended my relationship with my parents. I looked, brothers and sisters, I looked recently at the ahadith about this. You know how in Dua Kumel we say, Allahumma ghfir li dhunuba allati tughayyiru an-ni'am, Allahumma ghfir li dhunuba allati tunzilu al-bala, Allahumma ghfir. We say, oh Allah, forgive me for these sins which turn blessings into curses, that cause bala to descend upon me, I found the same words being used in the hadith for the effect of cutting off relationship with parents. Qati'atur rahim tunzilu al-bala. Qati'atur rahim tughayyiru an-ni'am. You find that in our books of hadith, meaning that this it was really eye-opening for me, right? Our Imams have talked about how these sins have worldly effects on us, right? They affect our well-being, right? They can really change our lives. So there's a connection there between, the mind, the body, and the soul. And when we're talking about well-being, we have to look at all of these things. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam had so much trauma, right, in modern day terminology. He had so much difficulty. His body was tortured, right? But here he's talking about how he's in a state of health. Why? Because he's looking at it comprehensively, right? He is connected to Allah. He's spiritually alive. He's spiritually charged, right? He's an abd of Allah. And all of that has an impact on these other areas of his life as well, right? Something which is it's very powerful. Let's say, for example, that there's somebody who is physically healthy. There's somebody who is mentally, they don't have any major issues. But they are lacking purpose in life. They don't know what their purpose is. They're wandering aimlessly. They're like, they go from day to day. They just feel like, they're part of like just, a mouse in that wheel, that type of thing. They're just running around, right? So they have a lack of purpose. Maybe if they go to a doctor, the doctor said, look, there's no issue with you, right? A lot of times when you go to doctors, like what they're going to ask you is that, are you able to perform the functions that you need to perform on a day-to-day basis? And like, yeah, I can go to work, I can do that, I can move around. So, okay, well, you're fine, right? Because that's their perspective. It's a very utilitarian perspective. If you can do your thing, then you're fine. This person who's lacking purpose in life, right? He'll be like, okay, well, I'm fine, my body's fine. But he's not fine. He knows it's eating away at him. He's like, I don't know what I'm here for, right? This person will not have afiyah. He wouldn't know his purpose. The Imam teaches us in his du'as that you're asking Allah for purpose, for depth. In his dua for afiyah, in Sahih Sajjad, he says, oh Allah, give me basira in my activities. I want to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to feel like I'm moving towards a greater purpose. It's very important. If you don't have that, then all the blessings you have, like all the material things you have, all the health, it doesn't have meaning because you don't know how it all connects to something which is a greater purpose. You can be bleeding inside, but not be able to show any blood to a physician who looks at you from the outside. So this is another example of reframing that we have from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I've given two examples on this evening. One of them had to do with the principle of leaping forward, in the times of distress, and the other one about the perspective on afiyah, right? The need to be asking for that, right? He tells that man that, look, don't be stuck in that type of state, right? Don't be asking Allah to keep. No, you should be thinking about getting out of there. But when you go out of there, know about this thing called afiyah. It's very important. I believe that for this evening, this is sufficient, inshallah, in terms of covering the principles. And again, may Allah reward you for your patience. I know that it's been 2 nights, long lectures. May Allah reward you. I think it's time now for us to move to the Masa'ib portion. And inshallah, with the help of Allah, we want to remember the Masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله صلى الله عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك يا ليتنا كنا معكم. Inshallah, I know that a number of you have the intention to go for ziyarah of Arba'in. And when you go there, you can recite this on behalf of all of us, inshallah. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. Peace and blessings be upon you, O Imam Hussein, and upon the noble companions who are buried with you in Karbala. We say to you, if only we could have been with you and have attained the great victory that you attained. Sallallahu alayka ya Ali ibn al-Husayn, ya Zayn al-Abidin, ya ibn Rasulillah, يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا
إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا اشفع لنا عند Allah. We're remembering the martyrdom of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imagine on the night of his martyrdom, all those poor and needy people of Medina who would wake up seeing that food had been delivered to them by an unknown stranger who would be so kind and benign, who is going to be there for them to give them the food on this night. Imagine the people of Medina who might have woken early in the morning to hear the cries of Imam Sajjad, as he would say in his munajat, حتى متى وإلى متى أقول لك العتبى مرة بعد أخرى ثم لا تجد عندي صدقا ولا وفاء. How many times I turn to you, Allah, and I say that I have come back to you, I have repented, but you find me breaking my promise and I'm insincere to you. Imagine the people who would hear Imam Sajjad alayhi salam cry out, Wa ghawthahu, wa ghawthahu, wa ghawthahu. Oh Allah, come to my rescue, come to my rescue, come to my rescue. He would repeat this again and again. Now, in the early morning, who will they hear crying out in munajat and dua? History says that Imam Baqir alayhi salam took it upon himself to bury the body of his father. He made his way to Jannatul Baqi. Word spread through Medina. Everyone came out on the streets. They were mourning. They were mourning the departure of this world, from this world of Sayyid al-Sajidin, Zainul Abidin. Among them were the Shia, but even his enemies had come together to mourn the departure of this Imam. We can imagine when Imam Baqir alayhi salam was giving the ghusl of his father, he must have come across those places where they kept the chains that were bound tight on the Imam. He might have seen the marks of the whips that they used to hit the prisoners, the Asiran of Karbala. Ayatollah Jawadi Amali says that we should say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum, if only we could be with you. Not only the Shuhada of Karbala, if only we could be with you, oh, the Asiran, the prisoners who were taken and achieved that great victory that you achieved. What a struggle and musibah the Imam alayhi salam had to face. Imam Baqir alayhi salam is burying him. He is present at his burial. He is accompanied by his family members. But we have to ask, what was the condition when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was being buried in Karbala? What Imam Sajjad alayhi salam must have seen when he goes to the battlefield. He sees the bodies sprawled on the ground, the bodies that were trampled by the horses, the bodies that were severed. He asked for some straw mat to wrap the body of his father. They say that perhaps the Imam took some time putting the body of his father in his grave. The fiqh tells us that we have to place the body in a certain way where the head is facing towards the Qibla. What Imam Sajjad alayhi salam must have done when he's putting his body of his father in the grave. They say that on the grave of his father, he says that هذا قبر Hussein ibn Ali ibn al-Murtada ibn Abi Talib. This is the grave of Hussein, the son of Ali, the son of Abu Talib. Which Hussein was this? الذي قتل عطشانا. This is that Hussein who was killed while he was thirsty. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أيام. The intercession of his grandfather on the Day of Judgment. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time, Fatima Hussein.
يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. أحبك لو يقطعوني وعلى حبك يوذروني، وإذا دربي أتيهنى هل بماتم يحصلوني، معنوني بحبك دربي هو دربك وبشخص ثاني والله ما بدلك، ما شفت مثلك عايش لأجلك يلي ما واحد كفو يوصل لك، كفو يوصل لك. إن أغلقت كل الدروب دربي يبقى فقد درب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا من كل قلب حني أطوف وساتر علي، شلتني من وحل ذنبي إلى الجنة الحسينية، يلي قابلني ويلي ساترني، حبك بقلبي ما يطهرني، بسملت باسمك يلي ذي بدمك، بسجل خدامك لسه كاتبني. يا ساترا كل العيوب من يدنوني وفي قلب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين، ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. أنا الضايع يلاقيني الحضرة صارت سنيني. صباح 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 حسين ومساء انت تمسيني. اسمك الماسي عطر نفاسي يل صرت عندي اغلى من ناسي. عايش بخيرك ما شفت غيرك الحنان انت والدهر قاسي. لو كست عمري الذنوب يمحو ذنبي هواك يا حسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين يا مقلب القلوب. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا حب الأول وآخر يا شوق الخافي والظاهر. وسط عيني شلت رسمك يا من رغم الكسر جابر. علمتني أمي أنسى حتى اسمي واسرح بعالم حبك العذري. عيني توفى حسين أوقف بيا حسين. عيني توفى حسين أوقف بيا حسين. أهلي بحروفك حرزوا عمري. ما يكفي فيك لو أذوب ديني يقيني هو روحي حسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين يا مقلب القلوب. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. أنا الضمير ولقيتك معي من قبل وياي. حملتك دم حملتك روح تسابيحي وذكر بداي. عشقك اسلامي وديني والهامي. انا حي ميت انت ايماني. بك اعرف الله وانت لي قبله. بك اعرف الله وانت لي قبله. يلي من صغري انت ترعاني. لا ولن عنك اتوب من تكويني انا عبد الحسين. من تكويني انا عبد الحسين. من تكويني انا عبد الحسين يا مقلب القلوب. ثبت قلبي ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين يا مقلب القلوب. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. ثبت قلبي على حب الحسين. يا حسين 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 يا حسين.
کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر. 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 یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا. کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر. کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر. کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر. قبر پہ شبیر کی کرتے تھے عابد بکا، قبر پہ شبیر کی کرتے تھے عابد بکا، ہو گئی کیا کیا جفا سنیے شہ کربلا، ہو گئی کیا کیا جفا سنیے شہ کربلا، سر پہ کسی کے نہ تھی چادر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، ایک رسن میں بندھے چھوٹے بڑوں کے گلے، ایک رسن میں بندھے چھوٹے بڑوں کے گلے، پر سر دربار سب اس طرح لائے گئے، پر سر دربار سب اس طرح لائے گئے، کوٹھوں سے برساتے تھے پتھر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کے بازار میں مجمع کفار میں، کوفے کے بازار میں مجمع کفار میں، ایک تماشا سا تھا اہل ستمگار میں، ایک تماشا سا تھا اہل ستمگار میں، ایسے میں ماں بہن کھلے سر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، جب کیا سجاد سے آ کے کسی نے سوال، جب کیا سجاد سے آ کے کسی نے سوال، گزرا کہاں پر امام آپ کو زیادہ ملال، گزرا کہاں پر امام آپ کو زیادہ ملال، کہتے تھے الشام مقرر، یاد جب آ جاتا ہے بابا دل میرا پھٹ جاتا ہے بابا، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، کوفے کا اور شام کا منظر، یا حسین
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي، السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد، السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر، السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي، السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي، السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته.